task which faced America was tremendous. President Wilson said,
"It is not an army that we must shape and train for war. It is a nation."
American industry was heavily committed to supplying the Allies. Now the Secretary for War needed it to arm and supply her own soldiers.
War is no longer Samson with his shield and spear and sword, and David with his sling. It is the conflict of smokestacks now, the combat of the driving wheel and engine.
The government called in the great business tycoons. Bernard Baruch was placed in charge of coordinating all the nation's resources. All private shipping was commandeered, and new shipyards were built for the enormous task of transporting and supplying an army across 3,000 miles of ocean. Agriculture and food conservation were tirelessly organized and publicized. Life magazine urged its readers,
"Do not permit your child to take a bite or two from an apple and throw the rest away. Nowadays, even children must be taught to be patriotic to the core."
Like Britain in 1914, America was a naval power with only a small regular army. Immediately, she placed her fleet at the disposal of the Allies. On May the 4th, 1917, the first American warships reached Britain. Admiral Beatty welcomed their reinforcement to Britain's Grand Fleet. But it was the American army, the influx of her inexhaustible manhood, that Europe was waiting for. It was hard for the Allies to grasp the problems that faced the newly embattled giant. The strength of America's army when she entered the war was only 80,000 men, and most of them were on the Mexican border. To turn this tiny force into a trained army of hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions, was a stupendous task. Huge camps were built at breakneck speed, and men began training in them almost at once. The peaceful nation adapted itself to war with a speed and efficiency which the president had grimly prophesied.
Once lead this people into war, and they'll forget there was ever such a thing as tolerance. And the spirit of ruthless brutality will enter into the very fiber of our national life.
Conflicts arose between America and her allies. There was conflict between America's need for munitions and Allied needs. There was conflict between the demand of the Allies for immediate reinforcements and America's determination to build a great national army, as befitted her station among the powers. Allied missions headed by Marshal Joffre with all his fame for France, and by Mr. Balfour and General Sir Tom Bridges for Britain, pleaded for American soldiers. The Allies would have to wait, for America was irrevocably determined upon her course. The Yanks were coming, but they would come as a United States army, with a United States general, General Joseph Pershing. They would come in the fullness of time, and not before. Until then, the Allies must make shift to do without them. But for encouragement, as a token of what would follow, a handful of Americans, headed by Pershing, came to Europe to show the flag. They disembarked at Liverpool to a hero's welcome.
As we stepped off the gangplank onto British soil, the band struck up the Star-Spangled Banner to welcome us. This being the first time in history that an American Army contingent was ever officially received in England.
They went on to London, followed by the same tumultuous cheering. Pershing was greeted by the king.
It has always been my dream that the two English-speaking nations should someday be united in a great cause. And today, my dream is realized. Together, we are fighting for the greatest cause for which peoples could fight. The Anglo-Saxon race must save civilization.
The triumphal progress continued into France. In Paris, it swelled to a frenzy.
All felt that they were present at the magical operation of the transfusion of blood. Life arrived in floods to reanimate the mangled body of a France bled white by the innumerable wounds of 4 years.
At his new headquarters in the Hotel Crillon, Pershing was called out onto the balcony by the crowd in the Place de la Concorde. A breeze caught the folds of the French flag, and in a spontaneous gesture, the normally unemotional American took it and pressed it to his lips. No conquering army could have had a more rapturous welcome from its own people than France gave to this handful of inexperienced, untried, but vigorous and cheerful American soldiers. As yet, their fighting value was almost nothing, but their moral effect was everything. To the onlookers in the streets of Paris, it was one of the most poignant moments in history. The new world was coming to redress the balance of the old.